Hello YouTube, most of my sculpting videos are of creatures that I've made from various movies. In this video I'm going to make up my own creature, and you can see here I've got a box with some eyes in. If I go to car boot sales I look out for old vintage dolls, and they've got these amazing little glass eyes that come like this, and they've got like a little weight that is like a rocker for the blinking mechanism on the doll. So yeah, if I see a doll for just £2 or £3 or something, I'll buy it just for the eyes. I've also made quite a few heads recently, especially of Star Wars characters. And what I normally do when I make a head is just to buy like a doll's head or a mannequin head and use that as my starting point. Quite often when I buy those, they come with quite cool eyes in them. So rather than waste the eyes, I just cut them out. And these are all just plastic eyes, but they're quite realistic. You can see they don't look that much different from the glass ones. I obviously prefer the glass ones, but these aren't bad either. So I'll be able to use a couple of those in this sculpt that I'm doing today. Most of the mannequin heads that I buy are only £2 or £3, so if they come with eyes as well, that's a real bonus. Right, I didn't really have anything in mind when I decided to do this sculpt. I thought I would just sort of begin making a creature and kind of see what evolved. Sometimes in the past I've done drawings or sketches and then worked from those, but on this one I thought I would just kind of wing it in a way. One thing I did want it to have though was like an open mouth, so I decided to use this Nutribulb tub and just chop it with this saw here, a Tamiya saw, and just basically just cut the top off it, and then I can use that kind of hollow bit as the basis of a mouth. Using simple frameworks like this can make the whole sculpt a lot easier in the long run. I'm going to be using Milliput for the main detailed parts of this sculpt. If you haven't used Milliput before, it's a two-part putty. You mix the two parts together in equal amounts and then it sets rock hard at room temperature in about 4 hours. So this is what I really love about Milliput, is that you can just work on sections of your sculpt at a time and then you can join them all together. So here you can see I've done the eyes and the nose, and while that's setting I'm doing the mouth as well at the same time, and this is just very kind of loosely done. You can see it's still soft at this stage, so I can kind of bend it a bit, shape it a bit more if I want to. I could squash this tub if I wanted it to look like a more closed mouth, but as it is I think I'm just going to leave it like this with the mouth sort of fairly wide open, and then I'll join the eyes and the nose onto it and go from there. The nose that I ended up making looks quite snout-like, so it could easily have become a pig at this point, but anyway, you'll see what happens to it as it sort of evolves. You can see here that I've attached it on with just a bit more Milliput, smoothed it all in, make it nice and firm, and then again I can just start adding to this. At this point I was thinking that the creature would just be like a small thing, where maybe I just added some kind of almost like frog-like feet on the bottom, and then a couple of little arms, and it would be a really short, dumpy little character. But you'll see it obviously ends up becoming a lot bigger, which is normally what happens when I do a sculpt. Here you can see that I just started adding extra sections on. So I worked on the eyebrow ridge, and you can see I've added quite a lot of kind of wrinkles and things just by pressing into the Milliput while it's still soft. And then you can see I've added these kind of lumps in the sort of cheek type area. So they're kind of like cheeks, but they go into the mouth. And I was just kind of playing around, and I just ended up with this shape, and I quite liked it, and I thought this could turn into something a bit more interesting. I wanted quite a big ball type body, and I've got this big ball that's kind of like resin stone type stuff, and I could have just used that and worked on top of it, but I thought it'd be a waste of that particular sphere. So instead what I did was I ended up putting aluminium foil over the ball, and then I've just covered it all with kitchen paper and PVA glue to make like a skin, and then I've ended up filling that with just carrier bags and straw just to make it really solid. And then I've put this stick going through, which is just a piece of dowel. I drilled a hole through it, and then I've just screwed it to this baseboard, so that gives me a nice kind of firm body to stick the head on. You can see with the head here I've added some really cool kind of floppy ears, and then I've put these rodent teeth in there. I made them all separately. What's quite cool is if you make teeth separately, then you can kind of just make some rough gums, stick them in the mouth, and then just push the teeth up into the gums. I also made quite a long tongue and it sticks out of the mouth sideways, which is a bit quirky. Right, for the legs, I've used aluminium wire. It's like 2 millimeters thick, twisted around itself. And then I've just used aluminium foil to go over to make the legs. And they have ended up sort of fairly frog-like. And then I've done those long toes just with Milliput, flat sausages of Milliput to start with. Similar with the arms, I just did the wire first and then over the top a little bit of aluminium foil just to bulk it out a bit, and then the Milliput just to give me that rough sort of arm shape. You can see I've got a couple of wires sticking out for fingers. I'll obviously add a lot more fingers on when the time comes. I then had to drill a couple of holes where the shoulders are, and then I've just been able to feed those wires in from the arms and glue those in place. Then I'll be able to add more Milliput over the shoulders to kind of fix them firmly in place even more, make it much more sturdy and strong. I also started to think he's looking obviously really rodent-like and he needs a tail. So what I also did was take a piece of electrical cable, and then I just used my aluminium wire over the top of the electrical cable, twisted it round, and what that does is it means that you can kind of bend the tail into shape if you want it to be kind of a bit more S shape. I also screwed the legs on to make them a bit firmer, and I've gone over with the kitchen paper and PVA glue. I've also stapled this tail in place so it's nice and firmly attached to the board, and then I can work over the top of this tail with the aluminium foil again all squashed up, and then I'll use kitchen paper and PVA glue again over the top of that to create like a skin type texture. It's important to either use super PVA or wood flooring PVA because it's much stronger. Right, you can see here that I've added some fur. So when I go to my car boot sales and buy the doll's heads, I also am looking out for furry toys like teddy bears and that kind of thing. Anything where somebody is willing to sell them cheaply. On this occasion, this was like a sort of a furry waistcoat, and I thought that's perfect. And again, it was only like £2 or £3, so I bought that, and I was able to cut it into sections. And because it's so shaggy, I could just add one section on, and then when I added another section next to it, it all just tied in really nicely. You can see with the fingers I've drilled holes and added more wires, so I've got 4 fingers and a thumb on each. You'll notice on the feet here I have small toes on the outside. I end up changing that because I decide that I want the small toes to be on the inside. And quite often this is what happens when I do a sculpt. It ends up just evolving all the time. So you can see here, look, this is with the little toes on the outside. It just didn't look right to me. But I did the webbing, and again that's just kitchen paper, PVA glue, let all of that dry, and I come back and saw it off later. With the tail, I added loads of Milliput kind of blobs along all the way along the tail, and then merged them all in, and then added kitchen paper and PVA glue over the top. That just makes the whole tail much stronger, but it also gives it a skin-like texture as well. With the legs and the arms, I added a thin layer of Milliput over the top, and I've added a lot of wrinkles into those as well. Yeah, you can see, look, with this tail, because I did all the blobs separately, the tail is quite manoeuvrable, so it's not going to kind of snap off or anything. It's quite flexible and rubbery. Yeah, quite often I'll be quite a way through a sculpt and I'll have a bit where I think, hang on a minute, something needs to change here. I haven't got it quite right. And I'll just take my saw and saw a bit off. So in this case, I sawed off the feet right down at the base of each leg where it meets the foot. And then I swapped them over like this. So now the little toe is on the inside, and I think that looks much better, much more realistic, and quite like the feet that you often see like on rats and that sort of thing. Obviously I made mine a lot more webbed though, because I think that just makes the whole foot look a lot more interesting. I've added little knobbly bits as well, like where I think the sort of joints would be. At this point I can't wait to start painting it. I can see that all my textures are looking pretty reasonable, and I know that most of these textures end up kind of really showing up a lot more after they've been painted, but you have to sort of be a bit patient as well. So also with the tail at this point, I had screwed it into the base. You can't see it because I ended up kind of hiding it, but I've gone right through into there with a screw, and then I put a bit more kitchen paper and PVA glue over the top to disguise it, but it just attaches it to the board, and it means again that it's going to just be a whole lot stronger. I decided that it would be quite cool to get the airbrush out, and there was a part of me that thought I could spray the fur and I could spray it quite bright colours, but then I thought the whole creature's going to look more realistic if I stick to kind of natural rodenty type colours, and I think I made the right decision. You'll have to see if you agree with me. So I started by spraying the legs and all of the milliput coloured areas in this dark brown. What I've also done is spray the dark brown in where it meets the fur. So it gives this effect where the lighter fur is only on the sort of middle high raised areas, and the rest is all really dark. Now, when you first look at this, you go, oh God, he's ruined it. It just looks like a real mess. But can you see, like on the fur, the dark is in all of these areas that would naturally be shadowy. And I'm really pleased that I left all of the fur in the middle light. Again, I was thinking, I could spray that with, like, say, a yellow colour or something to kind of stain it a bit. But I decided not to. I thought it looks really natural as it is, so I'll leave it like that. It just meant that I could be really quite loose with the airbrush and really just tuck it into all of those darker spaces. And the only thing I had to avoid really was getting the brown too much on the eyes. Okay, this is how he turned out. So I'll talk you through a lot of the painting stages that I've done to get to this point. So for the main kind of flesh areas, what I did was I mixed up quite a dark flesh colour, so using a mixture of yellow ochre and cadmium red and white. This is all System 3 acrylic paints that I use to paint it with, apart from anything that's airbrushed. And then I use Liquitex, which is like a liquid acrylic through the airbrush. So you can see here I've also gone in with a pink colour. So the pink was for the tips of the fingers and toes, and on the insides of the legs, the tail, and quite a lot on his face. I'll come back to that in a second. The webbing I did on the toes as well, on the feet, sorry, and that worked quite well. So all of the flesh colours and the pink colours were done using a technique called dry brush, which is where you put some paint on your brush and then you rub it all on a bit of kitchen paper until the brush is basically almost dry, and then you're just using that to kind of dust the paint onto all of the higher areas. What that means is things like the wrinkles on the legs and the arms stay dark in all the deeper places of the wrinkles, and the brighter sort of flesh colours that you use bring out all the kind of high points of the wrinkles. You can see on the teeth I've gone in there with some orange colours and also some darker sort of yellow ochres. I've also added whiskers, and those were just bristles that I cut off a brush from a dustpan and brush, and that's worked really well. I just drilled little tiny holes and stuck them in place. With the eyes, they were just a bit too bright white, and I want this to look like a kind of a rabid rodent. So I've gone in and I've used a lot of the sort of yellowish colour in the eyes to start with, and then I've gone back in with some red, just cadmium red, into the corners of the eyes and the veins, and that's worked quite well. He looks a little bit mad, but I really love that effect. I've also done a few bristles similar to the whiskers on the top of his eyebrow ridge, and that's also worked really well. Okay, I hope you like how my rabid rodent has turned out. Let me know in the comments. Also, hit subscribe to see anything that I post up in the future. A massive thanks to Milliput for sponsoring this channel. If you haven't tried any, go out and try some because it's a brilliant product. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.